Happy Orktober everyone, and welcome to Retro Paint, the series where I'm going to take something old and paint it up like new. To celebrate this orkiest time of the year, I'm going to be painting up the minis from Gorkamorka, quite possibly the orkiest game that Games Workshop has ever produced. So what is Gorkamorka? It came out back in 1997, and it's a gang warfare simulator where all the gangs are orcs, or orc wannabes if you're digger knobs. As orcs love fighting more than anything else, the fact that they've crash landed on a barren desert world means that they'll have to scrap it out for enough teeth to buy all the shiny gubbins they could want. So this is the copy of Gorkamorka that I managed to pick up secondhand for 40 quid. It's not complete, unfortunately. There's a couple of little things missing, but everything important is here. Firstly, there is some frankly excellent cardboard and plastic scenery. Given that this cardboard is almost as old as me, it's in really good nick, and you can make some really interesting forts for the orcs, or you can have little bits of scatter terrain across your Gorkamorka table. There's a build guide and a quick rules primer with the words "read this first" on the front, as well as two books, Da Rules and Da Other Book. Now, I understand why they no longer name books like this, but it does bring a smile to my face when I get to read the sort of orky language on the front of books. Something else that makes me smile is the hand-drawn art throughout the book. It's all in black and white, and I'd love to see a modern reimagining of this art style, as while the computer-generated grandeur of all of the modern codexes is great, it does lack a little bit of the charm of these hand-drawn illustrations. Now, The Rules gives us details on how to actually play a game of Gorkamorka, with all the technicalities of moving, fighting, and shooting, where Da Other Book deals with managing your gang throughout a campaign, as they grow in skills and experience, and also as they get new equipment from the mechs in Mechtown. Let me know if you'd be interested to see some Gorkamorka games after these guys are all painted, in the comments down below. And then most importantly, and the biggest reason why I grabbed this off eBay for 40 quid, we've got all the models that we need from the original game. We've got 2 trucks, 2 tracks, and 12 orc boys or youths. Now the orc boys are on tiny weird bases, which means they're constantly falling over, but that's actually dealt with in the game. If an orc boy manages to fall off of a truck, then he counts as having fallen off of the vehicle and takes damage. This means you can load as many boys as you want into a truck, but you've got to be careful when moving, just in case they fall off. I think it's a really handy way of dealing with transport capacity. Now, let's get all these boys ready to scrap it out. I'll be splitting these half-half with the yellow armoured bad moons, who have all the fanciest gear, and the red armoured evil sons, because everybody knows red ones go faster. For this band of orky reprobates, I decided to try something a little bit different with painting. If you've been in the miniature painting YouTube sphere for any length of time, you'll probably have come across zenithal undercoating. Everyone seems to go on about it. There's also a method which recently gained popularity called slapchop, which I'll be trying to emulate a little bit in this video as well. For those of you not familiar, the principle is very similar to one from fine art, where you do underpainting of the model with a sort of grey scale, where you have the darkest areas black and the lightest areas white, and then on top of that you layer your paints to get really interesting shadows and highlights. The word from fine art that's used for this style is called grisaille. For these models in particular, as they're a little bit older and the details aren't necessarily the clearest, this will really help me to determine where the highlights are on the models and to be able to get some real interest, even though it may not be the clearest from the sculpt. So, quick primer on the method I'm going to be using, no pun intended. Firstly, the model is primed black. A grey dry brush is then applied heavily to the upraised surfaces. Finally, a white dry brush is applied to an even smaller portion of the model, where the model should be brightest. After this, channeling the slapchop method, what I'm going to do is paint thin paint over the top. Now traditionally I think the slapchop is done with contrast paints, but any thin down paint should do, or almost any paint, as you'll see a bit later on. So to paraphrase from possibly the greatest movie of our generation, let's paint some orc.
What's that from?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
You're a nerd. You're a weirdo.
Biggest nerd.
That's me. We started from the black undercoat, this time it's Vallejo black primer, to which I then added my grey. I used medium gunship grey from Vallejo, applied with a dry brush and applied pretty much all over the model. Next, I used white, again from Vallejo, this time focusing on the very highest areas on the model and the kind of harsh edges of armour panels, as well as the face. Anywhere where you want to draw people's attention to, get this in white. I next base coated the skin using, appropriately, orc flesh contrast paint. I then did all the leather bits using Vallejo mahogany. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, when I moved on to doing the red and yellow armour, the red went on no problem. Using the red allowed me to get some really interesting highlights and shadows in just a couple of coats. I didn't have to worry about going in and doing edge highlights or anything like that. The idea of this is speed and getting a really interesting effect as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, with the yellow is where this method kind of ran into a bit of a problem. No matter what I tried, I couldn't get an even layer and I couldn't get the highlights and shadows looking right. I started off using Vallejo paint. This is the Air range, which is famously thin. Which didn't work. But then even when I shifted to Avalanche Sunset Air from Games Workshop, I still had the same problem. It was going on patchily and it was running into the recesses, so the slapchop method did not seem to work for this paint. Though the coverage was better with the Citadel paint, I decided to actually put on a couple of layers and basically just treat it like a base paint. If you've done any slapchop with yellow with more success, please let me know what I was doing wrong in the comments down below. On the vehicles, I then moved on to the metals, which I dry brushed liberally with Vallejo gunmetal. If you've got your bingo cards, it's Hobby with Ollie has used gunmetal for the first time in a video. Now, on the larger, flatter panels, the metals weren't really doing it for me, so we'll come back to those a bit later, but there are a few more details on the models to fill in. For the Bad Moons, I used copper to accent the details, whereas for the Evil Suns, I utilised just more Vallejo gunmetal. Keep those bingo cards at the ready. To add a bit more life and detail to the faces, I applied Wraithbone over the teeth and into the eyes. Over the eyes, I then layered Avalanche Sunset to give a classic glowing yellow appearance, and then over the teeth, I layered them with Agrex Earthshade. The fur elements were coated in light brown from Vallejo, and then covered over with Agrex Earthshade. Now for details like this, I do think a shade helps, as it just kind of tends to pool into the recesses, and the slapchop grisaille method doesn't really cover that particularly well. The boots and the top knots were all coated with black, as well as the wheels on the trucks and tracks. Now, as I mentioned before, on the flat areas of the vehicles, I wasn't that happy with the metals, so I decided to come back in with some brown paint and stippled it on. For this, I took my dry brush, dabbed off most of the paint, just like before, and then went in poking at the model, okay? This is something you shouldn't really do with a regular paintbrush, but if you do it with your dry brush, you're gonna get that sort of stippled effect, and it gives you random coverage of that color. I also went in and did this with a little bit of the metal towards the bottom of the panels to indicate some battle damage as well. And so, the boys are back on the skid and ready to scrap it out for the best loot. If you're already a die-hard Gorkamorka player, let me know what your gang is like in the comments down below. One of the big reasons I got into Gorkamorka, or I was so interested in it, is from Mini Wargaming's amazing narrative campaigns, so if you haven't already, go check those out, they're really, really good fun. Also, let me know where I should go from here. What's the next thing I should be trying to pick up? Now there should be some other videos around on the screen here if you fancy them, and if you like what I did today, drop a like on the video and subscribe so you can see what I'm up to. I release new videos every Sunday. Thanks for watching, my name has been Ollie, this has been my hobby, and I'll see you next time.